I think those of us who have been in this industry for a while, I think for us it's incredibly motivating to see people coming to these conferences on weekends. I know weekends are precious for everyone. I think we all have very busy weeks, but the fact that you're able to actually make that choice and carve out that time and spend that time to really learn about what's happening in the industry, get some thoughts from others who've been in the industry for some time, I think that's very rewarding for people like us who are coming and talking at these events. So great to see that. I think when I was asked to kind of come and talk here, and I've been following the Cypher event for the last few years. I also follow the magazine, Analytics India magazine that Bhaskar and team run. And there's some incredible work going on, right? And this conference easily is the best analytics conference in India right now. And definitely, if you look at it globally, it has some of the most well-curated content. So you're very lucky that in Bangalore we have this event. And even if you're coming from outside Bangalore, it's worth your time to come and kind of just absorb a lot of the information. But when I was kind of thinking about what I can contribute, because there's so much good stuff that you're hearing every single day, I just kind of decided to keep it simple. I said, okay, let me look back at my own career. Over the course of last 20 years, I have been involved in the analytics space, sometimes partially, sometimes fully. And I started that involvement before the internet era, before the era of like the big tech revolution that has been sweeping us. And then I have worked both on the first party side, third party side, multiple countries and so on. So I thought, okay, what have I learned from these last 2 decades of being involved in this space? And especially like from the last 5-6 years, I would say that I have been spending a very large amount of time on really developing the human capital in this space. Getting people into this space, getting them excited, and giving them great careers. So I thought that, okay, let me kind of use that perspective and talk about a few top-of-mind issues that many of us are thinking about in this space today. Okay, so that's what the topic of the discussion from my side is. So I think let me kind of start with a thought, right? I mean, we are all hearing a lot about the technology wave coming and hitting us pretty hard. A lot of people are either anxious, confused, or worse, like scared about what's going to happen to their careers, their jobs in the coming years, right? And I think the statement here, I just kind of pulled it up from a pretty good magazine, Wired magazine, I think is symptomatic of that anxiety. There are people who are kind of making statements like this. Now, I have kind of not indicated when this statement was made. This was actually made in 1965, when that first wave of mainframe computers were coming and beginning to make an impact in the society. And even back then, people thought that there's going to be a massive unemployment, a lot of fields and careers are going to be impacted in a big way, and the machines are going to take over. Well, more than 50 years later, you know what has happened, right? It has created actually new careers, expanded existing careers, made the jobs more interesting and more relevant to society. So you could have easily put the present top of mind issue, like in the fill in the blank, I think I can say AI. Back then they were talking about cybernation. Cybernation was a term they were using for computerization. It was one of the early academic terms they were using. But in today's day and age, you can say AI and machine learning is going to do blah, 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 right? And people may actually believe it if you put this statement in front of people. So there is a lot of anxiety, and yes, a lot of it is hype, but then at the same time, you cannot be complacent. So when you think about our industry, the analytics industry, how should we think about a statement like this? Okay, we cannot, it's not a good idea to just say, you know what, people have said this in the past, people said this even when the steam engine came 200 years ago, but everything was fine. Well, every wave of technology can be different. And the past performance is no predictor of future. Maybe the next wave of technology would be more disruptive. And if you are not aware of like how to operate in this new world, you may get impacted. So what I want to do is kind of talk more from the point of view of the individual, right? As an individual, as you're thinking about your career going forward, like what are some of the issues you're going to see in the industry, not just technology, but what's happening in organizations, and how should you sort of best sort of mentally prepare yourself for that. So that's kind of what we'll talk about for the next few minutes. So I think I'm going to start by saying that, look, the topic of my discussion was, surviving and thriving. And many people may say, you know what, wait a minute, why are you even talking about surviving? This is like one of the hottest career paths today. We don't need to worry about surviving. We all are going to get multiple jobs, right? Well, yes, it is a hot industry, but it's also an industry that's going through a lot of change. And the way organizations are using it is also going to go through a lot of change in the coming years. So we should definitely first think about the surviving aspect, and then along with that, think about, okay, beyond surviving, how do I really thrive as a professional in this industry? So it's not really kind of a very light, silly remark saying that, hey, how do you survive in this industry? There is some good reasons why I think surviving in this industry for a professional is the first goal, and then it's about thriving. A lot of things are changing in the industry. The weight of expectations that other stakeholders in the organizations have from analytics is exploding. Okay, I will talk a bit more about that in the next slide. But that's like the first big thing that any professional who is in this industry or getting into this industry needs to understand. Weight of expectations is super high, probably higher than many other professions. Also, the industry is going through change. This industry has been around for 20, 30 years, but because of the new wave of technology, a lot of the professionals who are in this industry already, who've been already in this industry for the last 10 years, 15 years, they are in some state of confusion about how to reorient their careers. Okay? And the new people who are coming in, they have to learn from these people who have been around to see how they are adapting and also take inspiration from that and then sort of orient themselves. The third one is that organizations are still kind of figuring out different models in terms of, where does analytics fit into their company? Okay? So you have to be aware of that. As a professional in that, in the organization doing analytics, if there is confusion over where analytics fits, it can be a threat to you or it can also be an opportunity. Depends on just what mindset you go in with and how you kind of play your cards from that perspective. So I think all in all of these things kind of mean that you as a professional in this business, whether you've been around for 15 years in analytics, whether you just joined analytics from out of college, or you're coming from another industry and now switching to analytics, you need to kind of keep these things in mind as you kind of start or reignite your career in analytics. So let's talk a bit about what is this weight of expectations that I'm saying is there, right? Three big things that I can think of. We all kind of keep hearing about the promise of big data, right? So the media is talking about it, the politicians are talking about it, literally every single person is talking about it. So in any organization, anybody whose job is not analytics is assuming that this is a magic bullet. Right? They think that, look, if they can plug in analytics into their business, it's going to do amazing, amazing things. And that promise is we know that those who are kind of deep in the data, deep in the analytics, understand that delivering on that promise on a daily basis is not easy. Big data is a term, but in reality, it is pretty complex to really kind of fulfill the exact vision of connecting all of these different data sets across different parts of the organization into one actionable, workable, big data solution, right? So that's one thing that you have to be aware of, and you have to manage those expectations that others have about big data, that what is big data and what it can do and what it cannot do. The second is the hype of real time. So that is another phrase along with big data that is used very loosely nowadays. But because it is used so much, people start believing that it is the right thing to do and it is very, very important. One of the simplest ways analytics professionals today are dealing with this real-time hype is that there's a constant ask from senior management or even middle management in the organization that, hey, I want my dashboard to be updated hourly. I want it maybe every minute. Definitely I want it weekly. But a lot of times, the nature of the business problem that they're trying to solve does not need a real-time solution. Okay? So you have to really be on your toes to make sure that you act as a consultant and you tell them that, look, in this particular situation, you don't need to go real-time. Because if you don't do that, you are going to kind of get caught up in a cycle of doing a lot of work which will eventually not give any impact, and then that disappointment from the stakeholder will come back to you, because they believe that real time is the way to go. And it's the job of the analytics professional to help them understand where real time is useful and where it's not. Also, sometimes creating a real time solution can be either very expensive, can be very resource heavy, and take up a lot of useful resources that could be spent elsewhere. Okay? So again, in terms of just the weight of expectations that puts on the analyst, it's huge. You have to be really at the forefront in educating your organizational community on where real time makes sense and where it does not. If you don't do that well, you and your career will get impacted in some way or the other under that weight of expectations. If you do that really well, I think it's going to give you a lot of dividends in terms of the career that you have chosen. The third one is, again, a huge one, right? So I'm calling it the edge and the wedge. What the edge basically means is, okay, can you constantly keep creating these new insights that people don't know about? So people are coming to analytics constantly, especially because of that promise of big data and the hype of real time. That's all leading to the expectation that the analytics team or the analytics group can give you these breakthrough insights on a very regular basis. Okay? And frankly, those of us who have been in the industry for a long time know that finding those big insights or those breakthrough insights that give the company the edge in the marketplace is not easy. It doesn't happen every day. You can't just wake up in the morning, roll out of bed, have breakfast, and come up with an insight. It happens, periodically, but not regularly, right? So again, you have to kind of set the right expectation there. And then even more than the hunger for the edge, there is a huge hunger for the wedge. By wedge, what I mean is that, okay, what is actionable? How can I drive, that insight that I have, through a gap in the competitive marketplace? So how can I drive that wedge through the competitive marketplace? And so decision makers and management is constantly looking for analytics to help them come up with actionable insights. So it's not enough to just come up with a great insight, as an aha. They immediately kind of, are upping their expectation and saying, well, if it's not actionable, it's not useful, right? So in the past, what used to happen is the wedge was, let's see, if I go back 10, 15 years, stakeholders used to be pretty happy if you just kind of gave them the edge, and then they would say that, okay, let me go and figure out the wedge myself. But now the expectation from analytics is that, well, you're supposed to give me both the insight and the actionable delivery from it. So that's creating a lot of pressure for analytics professionals to really kind of balance all of these different kinds of expectations. And that's going to continue to grow. As the media hype continues, the technology keeps growing, and so on and so forth. The second one is a very interesting one, and I've been sort of thinking about this for many years now, that there is some sort of an identity crisis right now in our industry, because the industry has been around, as I said, for 20, 30, much more time than that, at least in some of the mature markets. And a lot of times being a data scientist or being an analytics professional was like being a really good baker. Like, you had the skills, you had some secret recipes, and you would bake these amazing cakes and pastries or whatever kind of products, right? And it was a very unique individual signature. Like, each analyst had their own style. They kind of used, different techniques to kind of, smell the data, see the data, touch the data, and came up with some very, very interesting and useful information for the organization. Now, what is happening is that because of this huge wave of technology, with artificial intelligence, deep learning, you heard about that just a few minutes ago, machine learning, all of these things coming in, a lot of these people who are the crafts type of, the craftsmen or the craftswomen of analytics are feeling like, okay, what does it mean? Like, now these computers are going to do whatever I was doing, and I was doing so well. These amazing cakes are now going to be baked by machine, and like, I don't really have a role to play. What is my new role? So there is an identity crisis brewing in terms of how do you keep yourself relevant and meaningful in terms of your role, right? So something that you've been doing for 10 years in a very unique way is now probably going to be taken over by machines to some extent. So that is, I think, something that's going on. So we're going from this kind of handcrafted approach to doing analytics to a more machine-learned insights approach. The second thing that's also changing is how do you influence within the organization, right? So earlier, analytics was mainly tied to middle management. Like middle management would come to analytics and ask questions, and you would help them run their business. And what is happening today is that senior management is getting a lot more involved and a lot more interested in using analytics. So often in organizations, senior management is kind of, in the past, senior management would kind of go through middle management and come to analytics. And now they kind of bypass middle management and they come straight to analytics, right? And they're saying, okay, I have got these questions and I need the answer yesterday, and can you give it in a way that I can understand, right? And that is a new skill that the analytics professional is having to learn. Because with the middle management, it was a little easier to work. They were much more down in the details. The questions they would ask were very, very specific, and you could sort of relate to each other better. I think with senior management, there's more challenges. The questions are much more vague. They're much more open-ended. The urgency is greater. The pressure is greater. And analytics is still learning how to influence senior management. And also, beyond just directly influencing senior management, like, okay, how do you kind of maintain your relationships with the rest of the organization, with the middle management, and make sure that they don't feel threatened by analytics, and you still support them and you support senior management. So the whole influence model is beginning to change. The third one I will kind of call out is the dynamic between the analytics group in an organization and IT, right? And that is also changing. So I still remember, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when I would have to work with an IT team, it was a very transactional relationship. They lived in their own world. Analytics organization was living in its own world. And whenever you needed help, you would go to the IT team. Maybe you open a ticket. Maybe you get something from them, and then you don't see each other again for the next few months. Today, with this whole technology wave that's coming, it has really forced the analytics professional and the analytics organization to really come much closer to the IT organization. So in a sense, they are like living in the same house, maybe as cousins, maybe not yet, we're not yet there where they are really siblings. The relationship is a bit uneasy, but it has some of the same things that come with being in a family, like the expectation of trust, hey, can I trust you? Can you trust me? Are we going to sort of do this thing together, or are we going to do our own thing? So just like siblings or cousins may have in a family, there's that kind of a relationship. It is closer. In many ways, it's good. But at the same time, there is a tension in that relationship. So as a professional who is working in the industry, you have to be very aware, and you have to figure out, okay, how do I work with IT, right? I mean, yes, IT is still in most cases a separate organization, but I need them. What is the relationship I can set up with IT that they get something out of the relationship and I get something out of the relationship? So in that sense, there is some identity crisis. The other thing that's happening is also that IT organizations are increasingly beginning to think that, okay, they should be delivering analytics tools and products to the senior management. So in many organizations, you have these two parallel streams going. There's an analytics organization that's creating its own analytics roadmap, but an IT organization, as part of its multiple pillars, also has the analytics roadmap. And often they will kind of clash instead of collaborate with each other. So there is a huge opportunity for the analytics professional to be a leader by figuring out with IT, how do I kind of join hands and collaborate and reduce the kind of friction and work together to deliver great solutions for the business. The third one is, where does analytics sit in the organization, right? And there's a few things I can talk about there. So the first one I'm kind of thinking is, okay, there are two kinds of models out there. There's one is the inside-out model, or there can be an outside-in model. What I mean by inside-out model is really that analytics is not a separate organization. It is simply embedded within a business function. So you have a business team, and analytics is blended into the business function. So there might be somebody who, half the time in the week is doing more of a business role, and half the time is doing an analytics role. So that's one model that is being tried by many companies. Okay? The other model is an outside-in, where analytics is its own organization. Okay? It could be a center of excellence, it could be a department, and it is sitting outside of the other functions, and it serves the other functions like they are customers or partners, right? I mean, I think the polite term is partners, but actually often the relationship is a customer or a client relationship. And as a professional, you need to figure out, you have to make some choices. You have to understand, like, okay, in which kind of an environment can you function better? Can you, control the variables better? Are you more comfortable being embedded in a business team? And that will come with its own set of, expectations and challenges and opportunities. Or do you prefer to be an outside-in kind of a role where you are in a separate analytics organization? There are advantages to both and limitations to both, right? When you are inside out, you get a very deep understanding of the business, but then you lack the broader horizontal perspective. When you are coming from outside in, you lack the depth in that particular business area, but then you have a broader perspective that you can bring to the table. And it depends on you how you use that as an advantage, or you end up being limited by that situation. The second one, where there is, again, still a lot of transition happening in companies, is how is analytics delivered? Is it more of a self-serve that, the business teams are simply given tools that they can use on their own, and the only job that analytics has is to create those tools and deliver to the business, and then kind of walk away? Or is the analytics team kind of, spoon-feeding the business with data and insights and the actionable ideas and so on, right? And then obviously in some companies, in large companies, some parts of the company are still doing spoon-fed, some have moved to self-serve. And then, again, for you as a professional, you have to think about, okay, given the kind of skills that I have, the kind of work I enjoy, what would I enjoy more? Would I enjoy building a great product and then delivering that great product to the business and to see them adopt it and use it on their own? There, obviously, I get that satisfaction of delivering great product, but then I'm not involved day-to-day in their business. The other model is, okay, do I like being in a position where the business is kind of dependent on me day-to-day, and they come to me day-to-day and ask me questions day-to-day, and I keep on kind of, giving them that information, I keep helping them, I keep educating them, and so on. Again, both kind of roles can have their own advantages and their own limitations, and then you can grow your career if you do well in either of these roles, but the choice would be yours. And you have to be aware of where you fit in well. Because if you choose the one where you actually don't have strengths, your career will kind of go through some bumps. The third one is tech-driven or tech-supported. It's kind of connected to what I talked earlier about the relationship between analytics and IT, that kind of a sibling or at least a close cousin relationship. What is happening in companies right now is that some companies have an analytics roadmap, and then technology teams or the technology tools are aligned to support that roadmap, or the technology team sets their technology roadmap, and then analytics has to adapt to it, right? So, the analytics team doesn't have the choice of deciding what should be their technology roadmap. They just simply have to adapt to whatever technology roadmap is being given by the IT team or by the senior leadership and so on. And in both situations, there are different kinds of career opportunities. If you are in a more tech-supported model where analytics drives the roadmap, you can play the role of the analytics evangelist to the technology organization and make sure that they give you the tools that you need. On the other hand, if it's a technology-driven situation, then you have to figure out, what's the best way in which you can use the existing resources in the organization to make a difference, right? And those skills can be very valuable if you kind of figure out how to do that. So I think these three are some of the key things that professionals are facing today. Whether they work as embedded inside the business or work as an outside group supporting the business, whether they develop products which are self-serve for the business or become more of a day-to-day, serve and volley kind of a relationship with the business, or they actually lead the roadmap for analytics and make sure technology is adapted to it, or they work with technology and then help make the right choices for what kind of analytics can we do. All right. So having seen these three broad areas of challenges or disruptions that are coming in the industry, I think we talked about three. We talked about the identity crisis. We talk about where does IT fit in, and we also talk about just the kind of the craft and the role that analysts can play in an organization. Now let's look at some of the broad groups of tasks that analytics falls into in most organizations, right? There's always a chance that there's a fifth one that I may not have covered, but let's look at the four broad categories. The first broad category is where analytics is responsible for helping run ops and projects. Here you're working much more with middle management than with senior management. And within this, there are three kinds of roles. One could be more of an operations analyst. So think about it like this, like, okay, your job is that you're a billing operations analyst, or you're a CRM analyst. You are pulling customer lists. You are pulling some basic reports and doing a lot of data pulls from various databases. And you're basically doing more of the repetitive routine tasks that run the business. These kind of jobs are typically there in many companies which have not yet become mature analytically. And a lot of the analytics staff is actually doing this kind of work. With the coming wave of AI, technology, and so on, these jobs probably will be the most at risk because many of them can be fairly easily automated with the new technologies that are coming. And the people who are currently doing these jobs have to kind of seriously start thinking about adapting to some of the other types of functions that I'm talking about. The second one is the insight generation, right? So this is the one where you have to find the edge in the business on a day-to-day basis. It could be a small edge, it could be a bigger edge. And this one actually requires a lot of strong skills in partnering with the business. It requires a lot of people skills in terms of really understanding the problem and really going deep into it. So even though the technology wave is coming, this role is not going to be impacted so much. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people in this role to adapt themselves and actually make their role even more interesting with the new technology. The third one is actually one step higher, which I'm calling the optimization analyst. And these are the people who are actually finding the wedge for the business. So they are using complex models, or maybe not so complex models, but what they're doing is really trying to help the business make big decisions, small and big decisions both, but often the big decisions as well. Like, hey, how to allocate my money, which product to launch in the market, which marketing campaign is doing better, and so on and so forth, right? So this one is a huge area where there is going to be tremendous opportunity. The impact of technology is going to be positive, not a negative one for this group. The second one is using analytics to provide a single source of truth for the organization. So there's a few different functions that analytics plays in organizations for this. So one is analytics is often responsible for measuring the business performance of an organization. Hey, on a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis, you have to kind of help management, senior management, understand what the business is doing, where the growth is coming from, where the decline is coming from, right? Now, this work is getting partially impacted by technology waves because there's a lot of very good data visualization tools as well as computing power that can help automate and run these reports, and actually not just run the reports, but actually also write, let's say, a commentary on what happened on the business. So the folks who work in this area will definitely feel some impact in the coming years, and they will have to adapt in terms of how they add value, if they want to continue doing this role. The second area is measurement, and this actually is a very huge area. The name sounds very neutral, but a lot of companies, one of the most basic things they struggle with is, okay, what are the right metrics that I should use to measure my business? And that requires a lot of good understanding of statistics, understanding of data, from where you can get the right data, as well as how do you kind of understand the business. So people who work in this field will definitely be thriving, even though technology wave is coming, because this one is fairly immune to a lot of the disruption that comes from technology. It is a little more of a theoretical side of analytics. And then the third one is integrity, and this is another fascinating one, where again, you are much more immune from the disruption. This is where, in an organization, for the same business question, there might be 5 different answers in 5 different parts of the company. And people often come to analytics to say that, I'm confused. I'm getting like 5 different answers from 5 different places. Why don't you look at everything and tell me what is the real truth, right? So this is a very, very, very important, vital role that analytics can play in organizations. And in mature organizations, analytics actually has a very strong position in doing this. The CEO will come to analytics and say, you help me understand what's happening on my business. I'm not getting the right answer from these 5 different teams. Okay, the third one is R&D, right? So a lot of companies have these teams that are working on very long-term ideas. And analytics is doing a lot of data mining and deep learning type models to really understand, what is the fundamental model that we have on the business? Can we change that model? Are there new ways to do in the business, right? And sometimes these ideas take multiple years to really crack and get adoption in the company. So the kind of people who really enjoy this kind of work, have to have that patience, and they have to have that willpower to continue working on these R&D kind of projects. But here, there is definitely a lot of opportunity and less of an impact from the disruption. The last one here is the data and tools innovation. So a lot of people in this industry work in this business. Either they're doing a lot of data management, data engineering, they're developing great products that others can use. And this is a big, multi-billion dollar industry globally. Now here what's happening is that with the technology disruption, move to open source, move to a demand for self-serve tools from senior executives and so on, huge change is happening. So the key suggestion for the professional who is in this area is to adapt themselves. Many people today are dealing with a huge and sometimes painful change or reskilling from, like, say, being SaaS experts to now learning, new tools like R and Python and so on, right? So that's just one example. Similarly, a lot of people have had to, move away from, just providing Excel-based reports to really learning the latest data visualization techniques and how do you deploy them in the organization. So there's, again, a lot of disruption coming. So this group definitely will have to adapt. Otherwise, if they don't adapt, they're going to become de-skilled in the future. So quickly, to recap, I think 3 categories. Which of the typical analytics tasks are most impacted, partially impacted, least impacted? When I say impacted, I mean it in a way that the impact could be disruptive or something that requires urgent attention. Not a positive impact, but more of a slightly negative impact, right? So the most impacted we talked about is operations. I think there people have to definitely rethink what career choices they want to make and maybe move into one of the other areas, because this area, automation is coming really fast. Data and tools, if you've already been doing data and tools for many years, you really need to reskill. If you're new, you need to make sure that you align with what your organization really is trying to do and try to lead thought leadership in that area. And then the partially impacted group, insights generators, optimizations experts, performance analysts, I think all of them have to adapt. They will have new tools now to use, but they have to now use their skills to add new value that they did not add in the future, in the past. And then the least impacted would be R&D, measurement, integrity. These are some of the more intellectually oriented areas where even though technology is coming, you will be more shielded because a lot of it is going to be based on the human mind. And even if technology is there, you will be kind of supervising the technology to give you what you need. Okay? So these are the main kind of roles that I see where the impact is at varying degrees. Now, last slide. Coming back to our original theme, surviving or thriving, right? I mean, yes, there will be a lot of these, different functions and tasks, different tools and technologies that you can, think about, right? So your choice is about, okay, what kind of role do I go into? What kind of technology I learn? Do I work on the business side? Do I work on the analytics side? But much more important, like based on my experience seeing people survive and thrive in this industry, is first and foremost, invest in the right mindset. Invest your career in the right mindset. And there's like four suggestions I can give you on this, right? Avoid what I'm calling the silo mindset. Don't think of your function, analytics, as a silo or as an isolated box. Actively engage with the other functions in the company. If you feel like marketing is interesting, learn as much as you can about marketing. If you think finance is interesting, learn as much as you can about finance. Because it's only when you marry analytics with another discipline that you can drive the most impact and drive the most influence in the organization. So don't, even if you're a statistician, don't just remain a statistician. Become like 50% a marketer or a 50% finance person or an operations person and so on. Always question the status quo, your own status quo or others. I think this is an area where the kind of people who naturally go into analytics have a very strong potential to really make an impact. Good analysts are always questioning the status quo and trying to change it using data and using insights, right? Because people are often stuck in status quo because they don't have data, and then things like politics and personal opinions come into play. Third one is you need to make a decision at some point in your career, maybe early, maybe mid, that whether you want to go more on the business side of analytics or you want to focus more on the technology side of analytics. It's very rare for the same person to be extremely good in both. Okay, and in terms of your career, in terms of your growth, promotion in the organization, it's competitive. So it's always good to kind of do things that you're really good at. So make that choice at some point, either early or late. And then finally, regardless of what kind of analytics task or role that you do, think like a CFO, think like a COO in your company. From a CFO perspective, it's all about, okay, if I do this project, what does the company get from it? Is it worth investing in from a cost perspective? Is it worth really investing in it from a short-term perspective or from a long-term perspective? When you bring that kind of a mindset to the table, people will notice, whether it's your mid-management colleagues or senior management, and you'll gain tremendous respect from them. Or you can come up with the operations COO perspective. Okay, I can see that there is something inefficient in this process here. I want to fix it. I want us to fix it. How do we all work together? That also will get you a huge respect in the organization. So kind of these four things, if you keep in mind, in terms of your mindset, all the other things that are happening around you will probably fall into place if these four you really cover well in a highly dynamic industry that's today. Okay? Thank you.